Well, we've got Brittany Benko here with us now. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. Now, first of all, you're currently working on a children's picture book about the autism spectrum.
Yes,
So,
sir.
can you just tell us a little bit about that book and what exactly it's going to be?
Yeah, absolutely. Originally, the idea came from the inspiration from my son. He was diagnosed with autism in November of 2020 at age 2. So I really just wanted to initially kind of get a book out there that would capture what it's like having autism
Yeah,
for people who may not know about it, or maybe just to connect with people who do know about it, and to really just make it a positive thing for little kids and families in general, just to understand what it's like, and they are perfect the way they are, and just really want
yeah.
to get into the positive side of having that diagnosis.
And I guess autism is one of those things that a lot of people don't really understand what it is, and it isn't really talked about much. I think it's kind of misunderstood.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I myself wasn't really too, I guess, aware of what it
Yeah.
was like, or, really understood it myself until my son got a diagnosis. So I think it's really important for kids and adults to really understand what it's like living in their little world and how they
Yeah,
think.
absolutely. Because we need to have a world that's understanding of everybody and the way everybody thinks and things. So it's really important that we understand things like autism. So you have also written some poetry as well, right? Which is quite interesting.
Yes, sir. I actually started a poetry blog back in 2019,
Mm,
just kind of for a hobby. And the more I started to connect with other writers, I realized how easy it was to self publish a book. So I made a goal to do that. And I was able to, get my book out there in November 2020. So
mm.
it was really quite exciting. And I was just surprised at how easy that process was.
Yeah, it's amazing these days with things like Amazon. You can publish your own book, where even 10 years ago, that would be mad because you have to go through a proper kind of publisher and they have to like it and go through all sorts of hurdles and probably pay loads of money.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It was just, not ever an idea that I had. I've always liked to write, but
Yeah,
I never thought of myself as a professional writer, so to
yeah.
speak. So it's really nice to have all those options for people who are stay-at-home moms, or just
Mm,
don't really have the money to reach out to a traditional publisher and
yeah.
really kind of just be able to do what they like to do.
Yeah, particularly with this pandemic where everybody said that during it they're going to write a book. So it's kind of made it possible that that finished product can actually be read by somebody.
Absolutely. Yes.
So what kind of got you into poetry and writing originally?
Well, my first poem that I wrote was actually at age 14 for an English assignment,
Oh.
and that my teacher liked it so much that she actually submitted it into a contest, and I ended up getting third place out of it. And I just really liked how easy it was to really just write the rhythm of the poetry, and how it just really took my mind off of a lot of other realistic things that were going on. And you can kind of just, sit back and relax and create this little world that, essentially doesn't exist, or does exist, because you can really do whatever you want with it.
Yeah, that's for sure. And what is it about poetry that's particularly interesting? Because a lot of people might kind of dismiss poetry and might not necessarily have it in their taste and might not understand it, as opposed to a book. So why do you think poetry is kind of special and an art?
Well, I think it's really interesting because number one, there's so many different ways to write it. And
Yeah.
I think it's a great way to have people express themselves and kind of, use it as an exercise per se to get their creative juices starting.
Mm,
So it's really nice. I've connected with a lot of people through writing poetry, and it just seems to have captured a lot of attention from certain people. So I definitely think it's a good idea for people to at least try to get into poetry, because it's a good way to really, stir that imagination, especially with little kids, which is, fantastic.
Yeah. And I remember when I was at school, we'd study a poem and we'd look for all kinds of metaphors and alliteration and things like that. Is that stuff you're thinking about when you write a poem, or is that stuff just kind of made up by high school teachers and it's not really intended by the poet?
Well, it really depends on what I'm writing about, or, who that audience is that I guess I'm trying to go for. So a lot of times when I write, I'll think of a topic and I'll just say, okay, well, what do I know about the topic? So sometimes I may have to do some research, and, I really like to write with that rhyming style.
Yeah.
So it's, I just try to know as much as I can about the topic, and just use words that actually make sense with the poem, instead of using like free verse. I guess I kind of like that challenge to make it where everything rhymes and it all makes sense at the same time.
Yeah, and poetry has to rhyme, because I think a lot of people, whenever they hear a poem that doesn't rhyme, they get so annoyed. Because I guess, what's the difference between a poem and just somebody reading out a sentence if it doesn't rhyme?
Yeah, well, I'm really glad you think so, because I think kind of the old way of writing poetry is kind of becoming a lost art, so to speak. And, I think it's really cool when I find people who can write a well-written poem that does rhyme. Now, I'm not saying that, today's modern poetry isn't good. It's just not the way that I'm used to writing. And I just don't think I would be very good at that, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah. And I suppose poetry and kind of musical lyrics, I think a lot of the time people perhaps compare them.
Sure, absolutely. And I think that makes a lot of sense, because I grew up in a lot of musical productions in school. So I guess I kind of have that mindset already. So I guess that's why it's just easier for me to write in rhyming style versus free verse.
Yeah. And would you ever consider being maybe a Bernie Taupin and writing the lyrics for somebody's song? Because I guess that might be just as easy as writing a poem that rhymes, maybe.
Well, yeah, I think that would be actually a pretty nice accomplishment. I definitely wouldn't back down from the challenge. If I ever got asked to do something like that, I think I would definitely consider it. I think it would be fun.
Absolutely, yeah. So do you have any poems that you're releasing in the future, and also just any kind of creative stuff that you're thinking of doing?
Well, yeah, I'm actually working on another poetry collection. It's about law enforcement, family lifestyle. So, kind of like what they go through on a day-to-day basis, and just to really have people understand, what it's like on their end, because I just feel that there's so much hate in the world. And, it's just, I think it's important for everyone to just kind of see past that, and just at the end of the day, realize they're just human beings trying to make the best of everything, just like all of us.
Yeah, and I guess, I suppose, with Black Lives Matter, people have sort of demonized the police, when really it's a very small minority that are racist. And you could say that about any group of people, I suppose. Yeah,
and it's really sad. I know when I was a kid, that kind of thinking, anyways, in my group of friends, it was really frowned upon. So I really hate to see that in today's society, because I really think it's just, people are just ripping themselves apart naturally, and not really, I just don't understand why people don't want to connect. So I think it's important that everyone understands from everyone's point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess it just gets to a very dangerous point if people feel that they don't like the police anymore and don't feel protected. I don't know what the solution to that is, but it's mad, I suppose.
Yes, it definitely can be.
Yeah. Well, where are we able to check out all your poetry and all your work if we'd like to have a little read of it?
Sure. So I have a website you can actually go to. I have two. One's an actual poetry blogging website, and the other one's just an author website, just to give basic updates on current books or projects that I'm working on. But if you're interested in the poetry website, you can actually go to the Wix website and look up poetic poetry, and it'll have a list of all of my blogs that I started since 2019. And there's also children's poetry on there as well, if people are interested in that.
Yeah, that's exciting. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show today. It's been great to have you here.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.